And I'm going to spotlight me. It's great to have everyone. As always, you can raise your hand virtually or chat me your question. I'm so pleased to have Dr. Gary Zola here. And he is the executive director of the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives and the Edward M. Ackerman Family Distinguished Professor of the American Jewish Experience and Reformed Jewish History at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, HUCJIR, in Cincinnati. That's a mouthful. And it's fascinating, and both Rabbi Sarada and I really want to take everyone to Cincinnati because the archives are amazing. In April 2011, Dr. Zola was appointed by President Obama to the Commission for the Preservation of American Heritage Abroad. Dr. Zola is the first faculty member of Hebrew Union College to receive such an appointment by a U.S. president. And he also, as we know, because we had Howard Mortman, gave a blessing to Congress. And I have to admit a few more people here. And I think it's always good to just, to see who are we talking about here. And here's Dr. Zola. That's with his son, Wisconsin. That's a fine university. And let's go. I have to admit a few more people here. I may have, a few more pictures that I want to share with everyone.
Vanessa, if you want to make me co-host, I can take care of admitting people.
Oh, Ross, that would be fantastic. Okay. I'm going to stop the share, but I have more pictures, of course, that I want to show. I'll make you a co-host too. Okay.
Vanessa, I can't see what you're showing everyone. I want to see too.
All right. Well, wait 1 second, because you're going to want to see this for sure. Let me get back. I had to call in the reserves. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure where you and Michael Lorge are, but I asked him to send pictures and he did. And I have, but this is the picture. This is the money picture. And I found it by happenstance. And I know Dr. Zola and I go back a long time, and this is the picture that proves it. There he is standing next to Arthur Ehrlich, Arthur who has hair. Gary is the redhead. Dr. Zola is the redhead. Rabbi Stephen Bob, Rabbi Mike Weinberg. I'm going to have to send you this picture, Dr. Zola, because I cannot quite. I see Rabbi Hart. I see Adam Gamron and Hillel Gamron. And so it's a fascinating picture from when we were at Olin St. Ruby Union Institute together. And I so look forward to your presentation today that will, perhaps you will tell us something about us, Rui, but all about the archives and Jewish and Black relations. So with no further ado, Rabbi Dr. Gary Zola. I wonder, were you, let's see where he is.
Here we go. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And first of all, I thank Vanessa for your introduction and for the pictures, which I hope I can get copies of for the American Jewish Archives.
Yes.
And, it's virtually very nice to be back in my hometown of Chicago, greater Chicagoland area. I hope you can see that and hear that despite tremendous obstacles being down here in Cincinnati, I've maintained my Chicago twang. And so it's wonderful to see so many of you here this morning. I do want to say that being virtually on the North Shore is very special to me. This literally was my stomping ground. It was where I grew up. I was a member of NIFTY, the Chicago region, and believe me, spent many events at both Lakeside and at Soleil back in the late 1960s. So I'm very happy to be here. I also want to offer a special shout out to Rabbi Sirota, and also you'll pass my greetings on to my student Rabbi Moffick, who both are your rabbis, and both who are, I have to tell you, and I'm not just saying this, wonderful supporters of the American Jewish Archives, both in terms of donating content to the American Jewish Archives and also in terms of their moral support. So Ike, it's great to see you, and thank you for being here this morning. And of course to Vanessa, thank you so much for inviting me to be with you. Now, I was just saying before all of you came on that I have the illness that afflicts so many clergy, in that I love to fill the sound of silence with my own voice. So if you're waiting for questions and answer period at the end, it's not going to happen, because I have a lot to try to show you. So what I want to urge you is just ask anything that is important to you. Anything you really want to ask along the way, we'll stop, and I'd rather do it that way because that way I'll be able to teach as much as I can. So now I'm going to be, in a minute, I'm going to be sharing my screen with you. Hopefully everyone will be able to see it. And in sharing my screen, I want to make sure I let you know, because I've been teaching now virtually for almost a year, I have two screens, so I'm going to be able to see each and every one of you, even though my share screen will take up a lot of your screen, and you will see what I'm projecting, and a lot of the people will go away, but I'll be able to see everybody. So those of you who are planning to stick your tongue out at me or go to sleep, I'm going to watch you. And since I am the director of the American Jewish Archives, that makes me the J. Edgar Hoover of American Jewry, as I have a file on everyone. So remember that I'm watching. Now, also want to point out that you'll have a vertical line sort of on the right side between the people you see and the document. You can take your mouse and slide that back and forth so you can see either more of the documents and make them larger, or you can see less and see more people, okay? So now, if all goes well, I'm going to try to share my document, and right now you should all see, if all is going well. Wait, I forgot, I have to stop sharing for a minute because I have to make sure you can hear my sound. So now I'm going to share again. Okay, hopefully all of you can see what's my PowerPoint, right?
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Okay, so we're going to begin. And this is a slide, a sketching of the historic Cincinnati campus, which is the mother campus of the entire apparatus of Hebrew Union College. The college was established in 1875 in Cincinnati, and it sits on this location where it presently sits ever since 1912, so over 100 and now 8 years. And so the American Jewish Archives, which I direct, I'm the only second director of the American Jewish Archives, that was founded by this man, Dr. Jacob Rader Marcus. I don't know how many of you have heard of Dr. Marcus, but is still known today as the Dean of American Jewish Historians. He was the first American-born scholar with a PhD to actually organize the field of American Jewish history and to write about it in an academic way. I know it may be a little difficult to believe, but before Dr. Marcus, there really wasn't much historical writing at all on American Jewish history. Marcus was one of the pioneers of the academic study of the American Jew. And in the year 1947, he established the American Jewish Archives. His famous line, he had a lot of famous lines, but one that is emblazoned over the entrance of the American Jewish Archives today is, "A people that is not conscious of its past can have little hope for its future." Now, when Dr. Marcus established the American Jewish Archives in 1947, this is what it looked like. He brought over a few files that had been located in the college's library, and he took over one of the buildings, which was no longer being used for its original purpose, and that's how it looked. Now, Vanessa just told you that she'd like to bring a group from Macomb to come down to Cincinnati. When you do, this is what you'll see. This is how the American Jewish Archives looks today. It's an interlocking three building connection. What you see on the left there is the older building. That's the main entrance there. And you swing around and you see the education building, and it'll come to a stop right there with the archives itself, where we keep all the records. And this is an actual photo of that entrance. And you should all take pride in this, because I saw on your website this morning that you take pride in being a member of the Reform movement, that your congregation is a member of the Union. I think you should know very well that you pay dues to be a member of the Union, and those dues help to sustain the Union of Reform Judaism, but also they help to sustain the Hebrew Union College. And since the American Jewish Archives is a semi-autonomous division of the Hebrew Union College, that means you're all on my board of directors. You all contribute in some small way to the AJA, and you should be proud of it, because it is today the world's largest catalog collection of documentary evidence in the world, probably the largest privately held collection of a Jewish community anywhere in the world. There are big collections, but the others are owned by the state. So Reform Judaism offers the world, and we have people come to study here from literally all over the world. My rest of my time with you, I'm going to just highlight some of the most remarkable documents that we have at the American Jewish Archives and teach you a little bit about them. And we're going to finish up today by focusing on a very timely topic, and that is Dr. King, the American Jewish community and civil rights, since tomorrow is, as we all know, MLK Day. So let's begin with one or two of the most remarkable documents relating to the American Jewish experience that we have at the American Jewish Archives. And again, I want to remind all of you, if you have a question or a comment, you just pop right up. Don't wait for me to ask you if there are questions. That won't happen. We'll begin our story with this man, Gerhard Riegner. Gerhard Riegner, he looked like that on the left when he was a very young man, when the story that I'm going to tell you began. I met him many years later in the late 1990s, when he looked like on the right, and he received an honorary degree from the Hebrew Union College. Dr. Riegner worked for the World Jewish Congress, and as a young man there, he was located in Geneva, and he was carrying on a variety of important administrative duties for the World Jewish Congress before World War II. Now I'm going to take you to a building that's located in the suburbs of Berlin. Does anybody recognize this building? And maybe some of you have actually been there. Anybody? Show me your hands if you do. I don't see any. Oh, yes. Is that Lila? Yes, please unmute yourself if you can and tell us what you think this is.
This is Wannsee.
Yes. Okay. You get an A in Zola's class today. That's great. This is, for those of you who've not been here, this is a beautiful, beautiful mansion, in a suburb of Berlin. It's about 20 minutes by train from Berlin. Called the area is called Wannsee, and it is so beautiful there. You cannot believe it. As you walk down this path, let's say walking towards yourself, there's a magnificent lake. It's a resort area with gargantuan sort of palatial structures. You're looking at the actual building that was owned by the Secret Service, by the SS of the Nazis, and they used this particular house for weekend meetings. I guess when they were tired of pillaging and killing and murdering, they needed a place to get away to relax, and they would go to Wannsee. And it is in this very place, and Lila can tell you, she's probably been there. It's in this very place where you would find a museum today, because in January of 1942, Hitler and Goebbels had determined that it was impossible to continue to sustain concentration camps, labor camps for the Jews that had been deported, and that the only solution was to eradicate them, to literally exterminate them, all of them, as quickly as possible. And if you go there today to this museum, you will see the actual minutes laid out on a table that were taken by none other than Adolf Eichmann, who was present, and carefully in that very Nazi-esque way, every detail was laid out, and now they're translated into numerous languages, but the original German is there, and you can actually go into this museum and see where this decision was made. It is here, friends, that the decision to exterminate European Jewry took place. And you're looking now at the faces of some of the leaders of this group, who were charged with the administrative duty of creating a system to carry this out. And there, of course, is Eichmann, and one of the other prominent figures was one of the leaders of this administrative task force was Richard Heydrich, who would somewhat later be assassinated in Prague. Now, the reason I go through this whole background is because our friend Gerhard Riegner in Geneva, one of his jobs was to try to figure out what was going on with the Jews who had been deported from their homes and put on trains and sent to the east and put into camps. And he, in his role and capacity as one of the administrators for the World Jewish Congress, he was charged with the duty of trying to actually keep a track of this. And in March, 2 months after this, March of 42, he learns through an informant, Gerhard Riegner does, he learns that this meeting had taken place, and that he believes, according to the informant, that later in the year, in 42, the Germans are actually going to start to exterminate the Jews. And so he needs to send a notice to his bosses in America, because the international headquarters no longer were in Europe. The war was on. The international headquarters were in America, and Rabbi Stephen Wise was the international president of the World Jewish Congress. And he needed to get a telegram to Rabbi Wise in New York, and he goes to the American Council in Geneva, and he says to the American Council, I want to send this telegram. And when the American Council sees what's in the telegram, he says, I cannot send that. That is you know, that's a fantastic story, and I'm not going to send that. And I'll let you, you know, announce that to the American public when there's no proof. I have to cut this story short, so I'll just say that Mr. Regner and the council in Geneva, the American Council, negotiate on this matter, and they frame. He has to go back and get additional validation of the story, and then he has to change the wording of the telegram to indicate that he cannot say that this is a fact for sure, and so forth. And finally, in August, he sends the telegram. He sends it to Rabbi Stephen Wise, and fortunately, he also sends it to the head of the World Jewish Congress in Britain, in Great Britain, a man by the name of Samuel Silverman. So the same telegram is sent to both people. Now, my friends, I have to bring you to the sad news that Rabbi Wise never receives his telegram. It does not show up. It seems to disappear into thin air. But however, early in August of 1942, Mr. Silverman, Samuel Silverman, in England, does receive that same telegram. And then by telephone, he notifies Stephen Wise. And then he says, Stephen Wise says, send me a copy of that telegram. Now that could be done through Western Union, because the Americans and the British were both allies at this point. So that there was communication. It didn't have to go as it did in Europe through the military attaché. And now you're going to look at this famous telegram, which scholars will all agree is the first official notification to the American Jewish community that the actual extermination of a European Jewry was underway. Americans, of course, and American Jews knew about the cruelty of the Nazis, but no one at this point had any idea that a mechanized technological murder was actually now being planned. You will see that the telegram begins. Can you all see it pretty well? Good.
Yes.
Good. So you can see that it's directed to Stephen Wise. By the way, Mrs. Schneeberger is one of Wise's many secretaries. And now the first line is actually from our friend Sam Silverman in Britain, who, by the way, was a member of Parliament, in addition to being the head of the World Jewish Congress of Great Britain. And the first line says, have received through the Foreign Office, that's the British Foreign Office, the following message from Regner. Stop. Now, from this point on, we now know, and I'll tell you the rest of the story in a minute, we now know that the telegram is exactly the same. He's reading his telegram that he received from Regner, and this is what it says. I have received an alarming report that in Führer's headquarters, a plan is discussed and under consideration, and all Jews in the countries occupied or controlled by Germany, numbering 3.5 to 4 million, should, after deportation and concentration in the East, at one blow, be exterminated to resolve once and for all the Jewish question in Europe. Page 2. The action is reportedly planned for autumn. By the way, a little interjection here. The action had already begun in March. And by the time this even arrived in the hands of Samuel Silverman, almost a million, close to a million Jews, probably 150,000 children, maybe more, had already been exterminated. I continue. Methods under discussion include prussic acid. And here comes the line that made it possible for this to be sent. We transmit this information with all necessary reservation, as exactitude cannot be confirmed, but the informant stated to have close connections with the highest German authorities, and his reports are generally reliable. Stop, inform, and consult New York. Now, the last line is Silverman talking. You can see his name at the bottom. And Silverman says, I have checked with the British Foreign Office, and the British Foreign Office, that's like the State Department, has no information bearing on or confirming this story. That's a lie. It's a bold-faced lie. And Stephen Wise, when he gets the telegram, goes to the State Department and speaks to the Undersecretary of State and is told the exact same thing. Rabbi, don't say anything. We'll check into this because we know nothing about it. They did know something about it. They were fully aware of what was under, and they're trying to figure out how to handle this politically. After 6 weeks, they go to Rabbi Wise and they say, with a hands wringing, Rabbi, your worst fears are true. This is accurate. The Germans are exterminating the Jews, and President Roosevelt has determined that we will win the war, and those who commit crimes against humanity will be punished. Stephen Wise organizes a major news conference, which takes place the very end of November, about 6 weeks after he receives it, and he announces it. And as some of you may know from reading the histories on this epic story, the New York Times carries the press conference and puts that news on page 10 of the Times. There are two.
Gary,
Yeah.
we have one question. Any idea who the informant was?
We do not know, no. But one other thing is this, and I'll end and move on. What happened to Stephen Wise's telegram? How come he didn't get it? Nobody knew. It seemed to have just disappeared. Well, in the year 1993, which is 50 years after this telegram was sent, a wonderful and talented scholar who by the name of Richard Brightman, who taught at American University. Brightman was researching his book on the Holocaust, and he was at the Library of Congress, the National Archives, and he was going back year after year to look at material. And as you know, anything that is not a national secret has to be released if it's held in confidence after 50 years. And Brightman writes in the introduction to his book that though he had seen this telegram at the American Jewish Archives, he was stunned to receive in 1993 a folder that had the original telegram. And now, many years later, right, almost 30, 40 years later, we know a lot more that yes, this telegram was withheld from the American public by the State Department, not by President Roosevelt and not by the Secretary of Treasury or the Secretary of State. They didn't know a thing about this. It came to middle managers who felt that it was just not accurate and that it was a political hot potato that should not be released. And by the time the State Department confirmed with Rabbi Wise that the information was correct. There was just no point in letting him know that the telegram had been withheld. So this is, if you go after class, not now, you go online and you look up the words Regner telegram, you will see this appears in many books. It's a very famous document, and it is in the World Jewish Congress papers at the American Jewish Archives. Now I'm going to take you to another story. We go from something very serious to something somewhat humorous, and that is the very beginnings of the Hebrew Union College. You're looking at a building that no longer stands in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's called the Mound Street Temple, or B'nai Israel. Today it's known as Rockdale Temple. And this is a big, beautiful building that was located on Mound Street in Cincinnati. It has been torn down, and it's still, the congregation very much alive and exists in a new modern building. But this congregation is the oldest Jewish congregation west of the Alleghenies, B'nai Israel. And it's in this vestry room, in the classroom, which I'm showing you right now, where the first classes of the Hebrew Union College took place in 1875 in Cincinnati. That's where the first students studied. And here, sometimes they studied at a building that still stands, and that building is the Plum Street Temple, which is still the beautiful home of the Isaac M. Wise Temple, B'nai Jeshurun in Cincinnati. And many students, we had about 12 in 1875, including one woman. By the way, that's the way the Plum Street Temple looks today. It's a magnificent building, and that's worth coming to Cincinnati just to see that, by the way. And then in 1882, the college bought this mansion in downtown Cincinnati that also is no longer standing. So these pictures are all we have left. And I'll blow up the doorway for you. You can see very faintly the words Hebrew Union College on the mansion. And after 8 years, the year 1883, 4 years of high school study and 4 years of college at the University of Cincinnati, in 1883, the very first class of the Hebrew Union College is going to be ordained. And these are your first 4 American trained rabbis ordained, first time in America, in Cincinnati, Ohio. And here are their names. And after the ordination on July the 11th, 1883, there was a big party that was being held to celebrate the ordination. And that party took place at this beautiful hotel, again, no longer standing, called the Highland House. And it is on one of the beautiful bluffs over the Ohio River. You can see, if you look carefully, that there was a big plaza and people could walk out and just watch the barges and the boats go by on the Ohio. It was the place to have a party, and 200 lay people from the Union of American Hebrew Congregations filed into Cincinnati, Ohio, to have a big party celebrating the ordination of the first 4 rabbis. And they sat down at dinner, and on their plates, they found a menu to tell them what it was they were going to be eating that night. And they opened up their menu, and this is what they saw: the banquet in honor of the delegates of the Council of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, the Highland House, July the 11th, 1883. What would they have to eat that night? Well, we know because we have the menu. As you can see, the very first thing they had was little neck clams. That's how they began this celebration for the ordination of rabbis. And then, if that wasn't enough, we could have a little salad de shrimp. And you'll see they served pigeons, which also are not, and frog legs. And the chicken was the main course. So if you're going to have chicken, why not have an assorted cakes with ice cream? You might as well go the whole way. Now, this is known to historians as the Treifa banquet menu. And the only copy of this particular event, there's only one copy, original copy, and that's located at the American Jewish Archive. And many people, I'm sure some of you are going to be asking Vanessa, ask him, why would they serve non-kosher food at a rabbinical school party? What was on their mind? And the answer to your question very quickly, there's a whole article on this, and I'd be glad to refer you to it. The answer to your question is that the Eastern Europeans, that are most of our forebears, had not yet come over with their affinity for traditional practices. The only Jews who were in America at that time were the Central European Jews who'd come here in the 1840s and 1850s from Central Europe. I mean, the states of Germany and Austria and Hungarian Empire. They had lived here for 25 years and they assimilated, and for them, they had liberalized to the point that it was very common in Jewish communal settings to eat this way. Now, you may say to me, I can't believe that. That sounds outrageous that a Jewish group would actually serve such food. So I have to prove it to you. And the American Jewish Archives is just filled with menus from the 1880s showing that all sorts of Jewish organizations ate that way when they gathered. Here's a banquet from the Grand Lodge of B'nai B'rith, and I'm going to blow up. Wait, let me see if I can go back. I guess I didn't blow it up. I thought I did. But right here, you can see right here, if you look carefully where I'm putting my mouse, it says oysters right here. You see? Now I'm turning to another menu. This is a golden wedding anniversary to a couple that was married in 1845, and they're celebrating their golden wedding anniversary in 95. That's only a few years later. And when you look at the menu for that, you see oysters on a shell, followed by, of course, a good Jewish delicacy, chicken noodle soup. And here is another, the alumni of the Hebrew Union College meeting in 98 in celebration of Dr. Mel Senior. He was a faculty member, his 70th birthday. What did they eat? Oysters. So I could go on and on and on. The main point here is that the story that this was some kind of statement, that this was some kind of, deliberate affront to traditional Judaism is just malarkey. Or as my health teacher used to say in Evanston, I want you to learn it from me and not hear it in the streets. The truth is, this is the way the Jews who were here from the 1840s and 50s had learned to acculturate and assimilate, and they weren't troubled by this. Now,
Gary, I have two questions for
go
you.
right ahead. Good. I want you to interrupt.
Okay, I'm interrupting. This is from the telegrams. Isn't withholding of the telegram evidence of the anti-Semitism in the State Department?
Of course.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good answer.
Of course. We all of us take a great deal of pride in Jewish life in America, and we should. But that does not mean that there was not ever anti-Semitism in America. Anti-Semitism in America has existed from the very beginning, from the colonial period. And what is heroic, and by the way, it applies to our world today, what we're facing right now, is all these years, right up to the present time, our predecessors, I was just reading about this, an amazing collection that we have at the American Jewish Archives of a congressman by the name of Samuel Dickstein. And you could spend a year teaching a course on anti-Semitism in America, but our predecessors fought back. They fought back in a heroic way. And that's now the challenge before us, if I dare say so. It's pretty discouraging out there, but and I'm not comparing what's going on today to the past. You can't really do that accurately, but I can tell you that never ever have our predecessors given up the ship. They have fought back against anti-Semitism, definitely anti-Semitism in the State Department. Another question.
Where are the earlier rabbis of the UAHC, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, educated and ordained?
Okay, so first of all, the first ordained rabbi in America is an immigrant who came here in the year 1840. Prior to 1840, the religious leaders in this country were basically chazanim, some of them who were knowledgeable, many of them who were ignoramuses. All they could do is chant the service. It was after 1840 we start to have ordained, trained rabbis come. Isaac Mayer Wise arrives here in the year 1846, which makes him one of the first 5, 6, 7 trained rabbis to come to this country. And it was Wise, the founder of all of our institutions in America, that is the Union, the college, the CCAR. It is Wise's recognition, one of his great contributions, many, though he had shortcomings, but many, many of his great contributions was the idea that if we do not train rabbis who are raised in this country, who understand the American culture, if we depend upon Europe to bring in rabbis, American Judaism will not flourish. And in other words, the two rabbis who lead you and your cantor, this is a direct line to Isaac Mayer Wise's dream that we will only be able to have a vibrant American Jewish community and hope for the future if the leaders, religious leaders, understand our community, grew up in our community, understand the Jews they're serving, and are trained here to do so. So he was a big hero. All right, shall I keep going, Vanessa?
Keep going, yeah, keep going.
Okay, so now I am going to skip ahead. I was going to introduce you to this man, but I don't know that we have time for that. So I'm going to go to, before we get to, one last thing before we get to Dr. King, and that is, I am showing you a picture of the famous Rabbi Stephen Wise, who, by the way, is no relationship to Isaac Wise. They're not related in any way, just happen to share the same name. And of course, Stephen Wise was a tremendous figure in 20th century American Jewish life, founder of the American Jewish Congress, founder of the Jewish Institute of Religion, founder of the World Jewish Congress, one of the co-founders of the American Civil Liberties Union, a fighter for child labor law, and one of the conveners of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, a real fire-breathing, progressive American Jew and a leader. And I'd love to tell you the whole story of how I have at the American Jewish Archives the recordings, which I'm going to play just a snippet of. But if I do that, I'll use up all the time that I have left. So I'm just going to say that at the American Jewish Archives, during my directorship, we were able to procure 172 aluminum albums. They're recordings of Rabbi Wise preaching at Carnegie Hall. That's where he had services on Sundays from the year 1910 until his death in 1949. And at his heyday in the 1920s and 30s, 3,500 people, Jews and non-Jews, would come to his services and listen to his comments on the events of the day. And Wise was often recorded. We have 172 between the year 1934 and 1942. I am going to play for you a little clip because you're going to be now projected back into time over 80 years. And you can imagine yourself sitting in Carnegie Hall 10 days, 2 weeks before Pearl Harbor. And Stephen Wise is talking about the war that he believes is about to come. And he's dealing in his sermon with the question, what will become of the Jew during the war? And he delivers an amazing sermon that lights upon 3 points. He says the Jew during the war that's about to happen, he doesn't know that it's going to happen in 10 days. He says the Jew is going to become a soldier. The Jew is going to become a sufferer. And the Jew is going to become a symbol. And I'm taking this little clip that comes from his second point, the suffering of the Jew. As you can see, November 23rd, 1941.
Story of Rabbi Werner in one of the neighboring countries of Germany, who was captured by the Gestapo, tortured and mocked, and finally, for it was the Sabbath, these Gestapo agents turn to Rabbi Werner and they force him, after stripping him of his garments, tear the wedding ring from his hand, teeth which are not even capable of sustaining the effort. And then after these false teeth of this aged rabbi have been ground under the heels of a stormtrooper, they turn to him and say, today is the Sabbath. You are going to preach today. You will preach your sermon to us. Rabbi Werner preaches the sermon to them as they interrupt him with blows and kicks. And the subject of his address that day, the sermon he would have preached to his congregation, was upon the theme, all men are human, sinners, wrongdoers, the apparently wicked and ruthless and cruel, still they are human. Finally, as the essence of what the rabbi is saying breaks into their consciousness, the stormtroopers, overwhelmed with viciousness and guilt, turn to him and say, and are we too human? You consider us human also? And they rain blows and kicks and cruelties upon him. Answer, they say, are we human? And in one of the great moments of Jewish history, Rabbi Werner turns to them in the midst of all their cruelties and horrors heaped upon him, and answers in the essence of the Jewish spirit, Doch, even you are human, despite all that they may do, despite all that they might do. In other words, the Jewish understanding that there is humanity which cannot be destroyed in any man will not be broken. Herein the Jew rises victorious above 1,000 Gestapos and 10,000 Nazis. Triumphs as it triumphed through ages of persecution past.
There you have it. The Jewish spirit will not be defeated by the Nazis, he says, but will triumph as it's triumphed in ages past. And you have, I could have typed this out and let you read it, but this is how I teach in Cincinnati to the rabbinical students. I want them to hear his voice. I want them to hear the passion, and I want to project them back into the seats of Carnegie Hall 80 some years ago. Well, as the last thing for us, because I know we don't have forever, I want to talk a little bit about Dr. King in advance of tomorrow. You know that the destruction of European Jewry had its effect on both the African American community in the United States and, of course, the Jewish community. The African American community, which recognized that we were fighting against racists, white supremacists, and bigots in Nazi Germany, come back to an America that doesn't seem to be very much different from the battle they were fighting. And of course, in the 1950s, Jews begin slowly to understand, and as the 50s draw on, more and more about what really happened, even though we know that the survivors who came here talked about it and were not hiding their story. It didn't really fall upon the consciousness of the American people and the American Jewish community until the 60s. And really one of the turning points most scholars believe is the publication of Elie Wiesel's book, Night, which is in 1961. So these converge. I'm racing to get to the point, and we have Jews becoming very much interested in the civil rights movement. And Dr. King, as you know, rises to prominence in 1957 and 58 over the Montgomery Bus Boycott. I can't tell you the whole story right now, but you know that it took a year and he organized the community. This has to do with the resentment of the Black community of having to sit at the back of the bus. And after a year of boycotting the Black community, finally a resolution was made to disband that practice of forcing the Blacks to sit in the back of the bus. And that launched the Civil Rights Movement and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. King began to advocate for civil rights, and that was his ambition. And he spoke as a young man in the late 50s. He began speaking at churches and at synagogues. And I'm going to play for you now the earliest recorded voice of Dr. King speaking. This is a little bit of it at a synagogue. You can see how early it is yourself. It's in the late 50s, and it's right near you. He spoke at Beth Emmet of Evanston. And listen to what he said, just this little piece from this speech, which he's talking directly to a group of synagogue goers in a Reform synagogue who had come to hear him speak about his movement. (1958), just literally after the end of the bus boycott.
But I want to say to you that there are certain things within our social system to which I'm proud to be maladjusted, and to which I call upon you to be maladjusted. I never intend to adjust myself to the evils of segregation and the crippling effects of discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to the madness of militarism and the self-defeating effects of physical violence. This evening I call upon you to be maladjusted to all of these things. For you see, it may be that the salvation of our world lies in the hands of the maladjusted. I call upon you to be maladjusted. Yes, as maladjusted as Amos, who in the midst of the tragic injustices of his day could cry out in terms that echo across the generations, "Let judgment run down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream." As maladjusted as Lincoln, who had the vision to see that this nation could not exist half slave and half free. As maladjusted as Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery could cry out in terms lifted to cosmic proportion, "All men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
So you see, Dr. King really knows his audience. I love that phrase which he really developed for the Jewish community, the maladjusted. He sort of has a sense that Jews were countercultural, that we don't just flow along in the stream. We are always asking questions. And he says to this Jewish community, he says, "I don't want you to be adjusted to this, be maladjusted to this." And then he launches into citing all the reasons. He doesn't mention the New Testament at all. He talks about the prophets. He talks about Lincoln. He talks about the Constitution. He talks about Jefferson. These are all ideas that he knew would resonate with the Jewish community. And indeed, it has been shown again and again that I'm going to skip ahead a little because we don't have that much time. I'm just going to end with one other item.
And I do have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, I think this is I can't even call it the tip of the iceberg. It's a snowflake on the iceberg of all the information you have. And I am rejuvenated to get Macomb Sola Lakeside to Cincinnati. But one question I do have, and this is actually from Ross Erlbacher, our president. Since the advent of the internet, what are the new types of items that have come into the archive?
Well, first of all, that's a great question. And we have, I call it my $50,000 annex. We have in the American Jewish Archives what would have to be referred to as just a large hard drive. But it's a special archival large hard drive because over the last 15, 20 years, so much has been created electronically that it is, we now have what you might call a division of the American Jewish Archives where we keep things that are electronic. But always remember, I'm going to teach you two things that are very important. And you can be my, my advocates. Very often people say, "Well, why can't you just digitize everything? I mean, after all, what do you need all these buildings to save all of this stuff for? I can go into my office and take a piece of paper and put it on my copy machine and I hit a button and it scans into a PDF. So why the hell can't you do that?" And the answer to the question is twofold. First, it's not just a matter of scanning something. If you are making it available to the public, then it has to be hosted on your website, and it has to be done in a way that scholars and others know how to cite it and know how to find it again. And so that's a very time-consuming, difficult, and expensive process. Also, you can't take handwritten manuscripts and just scan them. Sometimes you can't read them. Sometimes they're fragile. Then they have to be transcribed. So this idea that we can just turn everything into a little digital chip and it'll be all ready for the world and it's simple as pie, and is just totally mistaken. It will take years and years and years to continue to digitize, and it will never really be completely done, though we'll arrive at a time at the future where much is available digitally. And the American Jewish Archives does make much of its collection available. We have numerous digital collections that are available. The other thing I want to point out, which very often people don't realize, is I say to it with my tongue very protruding into my cheek. So when somebody says, well, why can't you just digitize this stuff and throw it out? And I say, so let me just make sure I understand what you want me to do. You want me to take your grandmother's cookbook that she brought over from Europe and that she used to make her chicken soup and her matzo ball soup. And in fact, you can even see the stains from the kitchen that are on these pages. And you want me to digitize her recipes so that they're available to the whole world. And then you want me to take your grandmother's cookbook and throw it into the garbage. Is that what you want? And then people usually understand why you still need to have a place to preserve these materials. If you think that the New York Public Library is going to digitize all those books, which many of them are by Google, and therefore they're going to close their doors and burn down that building, you're just mistaken. We're going to live with both hard and soft copies for the foreseeable future. Okay. Now I want to end our time together by introducing you to this man. We have his collection. This is Rabbi Joachim Prinz. And this is my special tribute for all of you to what tomorrow. Dr. Prinz, there's a whole documentary on it. Vanessa, I urge you to find the documentary. It was put out about 3-4 years ago about his life. He's an amazing man. He was ordained in Germany, and he was the rabbi of the Friedens Temple, or the Temple of Peace in Berlin. And there's Dr. Michael Meyer has translated his autobiography, which was written in German. He was tipped off in 1937 by a kindergarten classmate of his who was in the SS, who indicated that they were going to kill Rabbi Prinz. And so Rabbi Prinz left Germany in 1937, and he came to America and became a rabbi in Newark, New Jersey. And he was a protege of Stephen Wise, who you just heard. And Rabbi Prinz Americanized, and in the 1950s, he becomes the head of the American Jewish Congress. He succeeds the deceased Stephen Wise. And Prinz, having been raised in Germany and lived through the rise of the Nazis and having to be relocated here, takes the American Jewish Congress and takes it into the focus of civil rights. And it joins together with Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership organization to work together to advance the cause of the Black man in America. And on August 28th, 1963, the March on Washington takes place, and the American Jewish Congress co-sponsors, along with 2 or 3 other different organizations and Dr. King's organization, the March on Washington. There were 2 rabbis who spoke on that occasion, though most of us only know that Dr. King spoke because of his great and iconic address, which we'll be hearing all day tomorrow, I Have a Dream. But Dr. Prinz was, there was a rabbi who was given the opportunity to do the opening prayer, but Dr. Prinz was actually given 3.5 minutes to speak. And so right before Dr. King spoke, literally, Dr. Prinz delivered this address that I'm about to play for you. And Mahalia Jackson had sung just before Dr. Prinz speaks. And before he starts to talk, he says, you know, some humorous line like, I wish I could sing as well as Mahalia. And then he begins to speak these words. And I think this is a very fitting way for our time together to come to a conclusion because of tomorrow. And I'll just say a few words after you hear this talk. Here is a picture of Dr. King and Dr. Prinz on that day with Walter Reuther behind them. These were the sponsors of the March on Washington. You know, they took a picture in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and you see here a young John, I'm now blocking Congressman John Lewis, right, John Lewis standing right next to Dr. Prinz, and here's Walter Reuther, and here's Baird Rustin and Dr. King himself. And then they went to the White House that day before the march. And this is President Kennedy with Vice President Johnson. And here's again, Dr. Prinz standing next to John Lewis and to Dr. King. And so let's listen to the words. When you hear Dr. King's address tomorrow, you'll know these were the words that preceded it.
I speak to you as an American Jew. Our fathers taught us thousands of years ago that when God created man, he created him as everybody's neighbor. Neighbor is not a geographic term. It is a moral concept. It means our collective responsibility for the preservation of man's dignity and integrity. Our Jewish historic experience of 3,500 years began with slavery and the yearning for freedom. I was the rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime. I learned many things. The most important thing that I learned in my life is that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problems. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. A great people which had created a great civilization had become a nation of silent onlookers. They remained silent in the face of hate, in the face of brutality, and in the face of mass murder. America must not become a nation of onlookers. America must not remain silent, not merely Black America, but all of America. It must speak up and act, from the president down to the humblest of us, and not for the sake of the Negro, not for the sake of the Black community, but for the sake of the image the dream, the idea, and the aspiration of America itself. Our children, yours and mine, in every school across the land, every morning, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, and then they, the children, speak fervently and innocently of this land as a land of liberty and justice for all. The time, I believe, has come to work together, for it is not enough to hope together, and it is not enough to pray together. To work together, that this children's oath pronounced every morning from Maine to California, from north to south, that this oath will become a glorious, unshakable reality, a morally renewed and united America. Thank you.
Well, friends, believe it or not, we've been together for an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing. And I hope you would all agree that those words, I've been teaching with that recording for more than 15 years, probably. And I can't think, it's hard to believe that his words are actually more and more relevant than even they were 15 years ago. A morally renewed and united America. None of us really can afford to be onlookers. So this is the reason why we study the past. We study the past, friends, not because the past repeats itself. It does not repeat itself. It echoes, and it offers us inspiration above all, because the story of the past up to the present has always been a story of struggle to overcome. And our American Jewish predecessors have done just that. And the American Jewish Archives is where we preserve those stories, the building blocks of history. And I'm sure all of you can sense that 50 years from now, some people will be going to the American Jewish Archives to read about what we did in our era, confronting the challenges that we face. So I want to thank you again for being with you, for being here today. It was a wonderful opportunity for me, and I do hope one day soon. I'll borrow the famous phrase from Colonel William Prescott at the Battle of Bunker Hill, who said, as you know, he said, wait till you see the whites of their eyes. So I'll just say to you, I can't wait to see the whites of your eyes in Cincinnati, and you come and visit the American Jewish Archives and the Hebrew Union College. Okay. Thank you so much.
We cannot thank you enough. I put in the chat, if you want to go to American Jewish Archives, just click on that link, because there's so much more there. I know you would take us to Graders and the chili places in Cincinnati. I can't thank Dr. Rabbi Gary Zola. A fabulous morning. Just one quick announcement. Next week, Dr. Ben Zeller, who spoke to us on the Sunday after the election, has the daunting task to talk to us the week. Hopefully it won't be as daunting the week after the inauguration. Hopefully there'll be nothing to report. It's great seeing everyone. Gary, you should look in the chat because you're getting a lot of kudos. Thank you to everyone. And there's so much more to do this MLK. We're inspired. We're ready to go on. And I hope to see you on Zoom. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Vanessa. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Zola.
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Amazing.